My name is Lily. One morning, I spilled my coffee and found a hidden letter behind the dishwasher. It said my father wasn't dead. And someone was watching me. That's when I realized my life wasn't just a lie, it was stolen. My mother didn't give me up. She vanished. And my family knows why. Please subscribe for more family betrayal and revenge story. Like our videos to help the channel grow. Welcome back to the story. You ever have a moment so ordinary it doesn't seem important, until everything changes because of it? For me, it was a cup of coffee. A stupid, clumsy spill on a Wednesday morning. I was already running late for work in Bellevue, juggling my laptop, keys, and phone when I reached for my travel mug on the counter. My hand bumped it. The lid wasn't screwed on. And just like that, caramel oat milk latte everywhere. Cursing under my breath, I grabbed a towel and got to work wiping it up. The puddle had dripped down the cabinet and pooled on the floor, so I crouched to clean it. That's when I noticed something strange. Tucked between the dishwasher and the cabinet wall was a folded, yellowed piece of paper. Not junk mail. Not a grocery list. It looked old, Curiosity 1. I fished it out. It was a single page, creased like it had been folded 100 times. The handwriting was messy, rushed, like whoever wrote it had done so in a panic. It read, "If you find this, he's not dead. I saw him near Snoqualmie last month. He asked about Lily. He knows she's still alive. Be careful." There was no signature. No date. Just that, my stomach twisted. Who the hell was this about? Me? Who wrote this? And who was he? I stared at my name, Lily, written in that same frantic scrawl, as if it were burning a hole through the page. I felt cold all over. I hadn't even finished processing it when I heard footsteps. My mom, Diane, my adoptive mom, walked into the kitchen. "Everything okay?" she asked, noticing the coffee mess. I didn't know what to say, so I just handed her the letter. The moment her eyes landed on it, her entire face changed. She didn't ask where I found it. Didn't ask what it was. She just snatched it from my hand like it was poison. "Where did you get this?" she hissed. "It was behind the dishwasher." "What is it? Who wrote it?" She didn't answer. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, as if checking if my dad was nearby. Or maybe making sure we were alone. "You weren't supposed to see this," she whispered. My skin prickled. "See what? Who's he?" Diane swallowed hard. "It's nothing. Just something from years ago. Forget it." But her face told me it wasn't nothing. It was everything. She crumpled the paper in her hand and turned to leave the room. I stood there frozen, staring at the empty space where the letter had been. At the coffee-stained floor. At the life I thought I knew, now cracked wide open. I didn't know it yet, but that piece of paper was a thread. And once I pulled on it, the entire fabric of my past would unravel, and I'd never look at my family the same way again. The rest of that day felt like walking through fog. I went to work, stared at my screen, and barely heard a word in the Zoom meetings. That letter, that single, trembling sentence, kept echoing in my head. He knows she's still alive. Who was he? And what did he want with me? When I got home, Diane acted like nothing had happened. She was chopping bell peppers, humming along to an old Brandy Carlisle song on the kitchen speaker. Not a trace of the panic from that morning. Not a word about the letter. Mark came home shortly after. I waited until after dinner to bring it up. "Can we talk?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "About my adoption." Mark froze mid-chew. Diane's hand tightened around her wine glass. "What about it?" Mark asked, too quickly. "Just who were my biological parents? Do you remember their names?" A beat of silence. Diane answered first. "Sweetie, we've been over this. You were a private adoption. From a friend who couldn't care for you." "Which friend?" I pressed. Mark stood up, picking up his plate. "That was a long time ago, Lily. What does it matter now?" "It matters," I said, standing too. Because I found something. A letter. It mentioned my name. Someone said my father isn't dead. Diane looked like she'd been slapped. That letter was old. Probably written by someone confused. We don't even know if it was about you. But it had my name on it. Mark turned, voice sharp. Let it go. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because deep down, I already knew they were hiding something. The next day, I started asking around. Redmond isn't the kind of place where people gossip loudly. They just smile politely and carry secrets behind manicured hedges and fresh siding. But I took a walk down the block, hoping someone might remember something. It was Mrs. Sandoval who gave me my first real clue. She's lived across the street since before I was born. Her front yard's full of garden gnomes and wind chimes, and she always wears a Seahawk sweatshirt, no matter the weather. Oh, Lily, she said when I asked about when I first came to the neighborhood. That was a strange night. What do you mean? I asked. She hesitated, glancing toward my house like she might get in trouble just for speaking. Then she said softly, I remember your mom, Diane, pulling into the driveway late. Real late. Rain pouring. She got out of the car with a bundle. A little girl. You. I frowned. You saw me? She nodded. You were wet. Cold. I thought she'd found you wandering or something. She never said where you came from. Just told everyone you were family. I felt my throat tighten. Did anyone ever meet my birth mom? Mrs. Sandoval shook her head slowly. Not a soul. One day, you weren't there. The next, you were. And no one ever asked. Because in Redmond. She looked me dead in the eye. There are things you just don't ask. You don't realize how fragile your identity is until you start pulling at the threads. And when it starts to unravel, there's no going back. After my talk with Mrs. Sandoval, something shifted in me. My parents' smiles felt forced. The walls of that house, the one I grew up in, suddenly felt like they were hiding more than just old family photos and boxes of Christmas lights. I needed proof. Something solid, so the next morning, I drove to the Seattle Public Records Office. I told them I was looking for my adoption paperwork, court filings, transfer of guardianship, anything. The woman behind the plexiglass partition typed my name in slowly, glancing up at me with each click of the keyboard. Then she frowned. There's nothing here, she said. Maybe it was sealed? I offered. She shook her head. If it were sealed, I'd see a record of that too. But it's like the file doesn't exist. I left with a pit in my stomach. No record. No trail. No proof that I was ever adopted legally, which meant Mark and Diane had lied. About everything. That night, when they went to bed, I stayed up, restless, buzzing with adrenaline. I remembered Diane's old laptop sitting in the hall closet. She hadn't touched it in years since upgrading to a tablet. I took it to my room, plugged it in, and prayed she never changed her password. She hadn't. Her email was still logged in. And within minutes, I found them, dozens of messages. All from a man named Douglas Merrick. At first, they looked innocent, cordial, even. Just checking in. Any news? Please call me. But then I saw the subject lines. Rachel's gone. This isn't what we agreed to. She wanted her daughter back. My heart started pounding. I clicked through the emails, reading faster and faster. One in particular stopped me cold. Diane, you told me she just needed time. That this would keep her safe. But now she's missing and I'm hearing things I can't ignore. Tell me the truth. Did you know what Mark was planning? Rachel didn't deserve this. She changed her mind. She wanted Lily back. Doug, my hands trembled. Rachel. My birth mother, she hadn't given me up. She hadn't just disappeared, she tried to come back for me, and something had happened to her. I sat in silence, staring at the screen, watching the cursor blink like a warning. I thought about the missing adoption file. The letter behind the dishwasher. Mrs. Sandoval's words, and I realized something that made my blood run cold. Whatever happened to Rachel Merrick? Mark and Diane weren't just hiding it, they were involved, and now I had her brother's name, Douglas, the one person who might be able to tell me who I really was. And what they did to the woman who gave me life. Sleep wasn't an option that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that email, Doug's message to Diane, burning behind my eyelids. She changed her mind. She wanted Lily back. But she never got the chance. And I needed to know why. The next morning, I skipped work and parked myself at the Seattle Public Library with my laptop, headphones, and 3 hours of battery life I planned to use like oxygen. I started digging. I searched Rachel Merrick missing, filtering for anything from around 2000 to 2002. At first, it was nothing. A few Facebook pages, some white pages listings that led nowhere. Then I found it, a small article from the Seattle Times, dated September 2001, woman missing after domestic dispute in Belltown. Rachel Merrick, 26, was reported missing by her brother, Douglas, after failing to return home from a late-night visit to an ex-boyfriend. She was last seen leaving an apartment building near Western Avenue. A neighbor claimed she appeared nervous and afraid, with visible bruises on her face. Police have not named a suspect. Anyone with information is urged to call the Seattle Police Department. My blood ran cold. Belltown. Western Avenue. I knew the area. I'd walked those streets 100 times without ever knowing that somewhere, years ago, my mother disappeared there. A photo accompanied the article. It was grainy, but her eyes. They were my eyes. The article mentioned an ex-boyfriend, but didn't name him. I had a feeling I didn't need it. I already knew who that man was, Mark. I stared at the screen, trying to process it. My parents, no, the people who raised me, had told me I was adopted through a family friend. They said my birth mother couldn't take care of me. But here was Rachel, desperate, bruised, and trying to escape something. Or someone, and the timeline. The article said she disappeared in September 2001. Mrs. Sandoval said Diane brought me home soaking wet one rainy night that same fall. The math added up. Too perfectly. Rachel didn't hand me over, she ran with me. And someone took me back. No. Not someone, them. Suddenly, my childhood felt like a polished lie. Birthday parties, school photos, bedtime stories, all built on the silence of a missing woman. A woman who looked like me. Who wanted me back, but she never made it. Why? That word started repeating in my head like a warning bell. Why did she never come back? Why did no one look harder? Why did Diane and Mark bury it? And the most important question of all, what exactly did they do to make sure Rachel Merrick never returned? I closed my laptop with shaking hands. Whatever had happened back then. It wasn't just abandonment, it was something darker, and I was going to find the truth, even if it destroyed the only family I'd ever known. After what I read about Rachel, I couldn't look at Mark or Diane the same way. Every smile felt rehearsed. Every glance felt like a test. And every second in that house made my skin crawl. I needed something, anything, to make sense of what they'd done. That's when I remembered the attic. It was cluttered with decades of boxes, old toys, furniture no one used, and bins labeled Christmas and summer clothes. But somewhere under all of that was Diane's old cedar chest. I hadn't seen it in years. I found it buried under a stack of baby clothes and dusty books. The brass latch creaked as I opened it. Inside were stacks of photo albums, cards, and half-faded Polaroids from the early 2000s, and then I found it. A photo, unlabeled, loose, and hidden between 2 pages of a scrapbook that didn't even belong in that album. It was a picture of a man holding a baby, me. I recognized myself instantly, the same wide-set eyes, the scar on my cheek I got when I fell off the swing set at age 3. But the man? I had no idea who he was. He looked mid-30s, maybe. A dark hoodie, unshaven face. His eyes were locked on me, not smiling, not posing, just staring. The back of the photo had 2 words written in black marker, she begged. That was it. I sat back on my heels, heart racing. Who wrote that? Who was she? Rachel? Had she begged for them to let her keep me? I didn't hesitate. I marched downstairs, photo in hand. Diane was in the living room, watching a cooking show like it was just another peaceful Tuesday. I tossed the photo onto the coffee table. She flinched. "Where did you find this?" she asked, her voice tight. "The attic," I said. Was this him? The man Rachel was running from? "Is this my father?" She didn't answer. Mark walked in, saw the photo, and went still. I turned to him. "Who is he?" Mark rubbed his forehead. "It's complicated." "No," I snapped. "You've been lying to me my entire life. Start talking." Diane's voice cracked. "Rachel. She was in trouble. She didn't want you near him. She begged us to take you, to keep you away." "Then what happened?" I demanded. "She disappears, and you just raise me like nothing ever happened?" Mark sat down slowly. "She changed her mind. She wanted you back." I felt like the air was being sucked out of the room. "So you kept me anyway?" They exchanged a look. "She was unstable," Diane whispered. "She would have ruined you." I stared at them both, stunned. That was their excuse? That she was unstable, not a word about the missing persons report. Not a word about the bruises. Not a word about what they really did to make sure Rachel never got me back. They confessed part of the truth, but not all of it, and now, I knew the truth wouldn't come easy. I'd have to rip it out of them myself. I didn't sleep that night. Even after Diane and Mark's partial confession, I felt like I was walking through a version of my life that had been carefully rewritten, pages torn out, lines crossed over, whole chapters blacked out. The photo. The words she begged. The way they spoke of Rachel like she was unstable, like she didn't matter, but someone else had believed her, Douglas, her brother. My uncle, I had his name from the emails. It didn't take long to find a phone number linked to a small landscaping business outside of Olympia. I called 3 times. No answer. The 4th time, someone picked up. "Yeah?" The voice was gruff, older, suspicious. "Hi, is this Douglas Merrick?" Who's asking?" "My name is Lily." I think I'm your niece." Silence. Just breathing, then, finally, "Rachel's Lily?" I felt tears sting the corners of my eyes. "Yes." He exhaled hard. "Where are you?" We met the next day in a coffee shop in Issaquah, neutral ground. Halfway between my world and whatever was left of his. He wore a battered raincoat, hair graying at the temples, and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. When he saw me, he stood slowly. "You look just like her." I sat across from him, my hands still trembling. "She's really gone, isn't she?" He nodded. "They never found a body. But after that night, she never used her bank account, never called. Nothing. And I always knew, deep down, I knew those people had something to do with it." He told me everything. Rachel had been in an abusive relationship with Mark Holloway. She tried to leave him, but she was scared. She was pregnant with me. When I was born, she stayed hidden for a while, living with Douglas. Trying to rebuild her life. Then one night, she told him she was going to see Mark. She said he'd changed. That he just wanted to meet his daughter once. Douglas begged her not to go. She left anyway. She never came back. Douglas called the police. Filed a report. But Mark had an alibi. Said he hadn't seen her in weeks. No one could prove otherwise. The case went cold. Weeks later, Mark and Diane suddenly had a daughter, me. Douglas tried to get custody. But with no legal proof that I was his niece, no body, no DNA, his case went nowhere. The Holloways had the resources. The reputation. And the lies. "I watched them raise you from a distance," Douglas said. "Tried to contact them. Tried to fight. They threatened me. Told me to stop. That it was better for you this way." I stared at him, stunned. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I didn't know where you were. They moved. Changed your last name. Scrubbed everything. Then he leaned forward. But now you're old enough to know the truth. And if you want to make them pay for what they did to your mother, I'll help you." And just like that, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. I didn't come out swinging. I wanted them to feel it first. The doubt, the fear, the slow, creeping sense that their lies were finally catching up to them. Douglas and I worked in silence, planning everything carefully. He had kept copies of his old court filings, old letters Rachel had written, and even a police report that was quietly buried when no one pushed. And me? I had access. I lived in the belly of the lie. The first thing I did was simple. One morning, Diane found a printed photo on her windshield, the same photo I found in the attic. The one with me as a baby, held by that man. On the back, I'd scrawled in red marker, "She begged." She didn't say a word about it at dinner, but her hands shook when she passed me the salt. Next, I emailed them both, separately, from an anonymous account, with lines lifted straight from Douglas's emails to Diane years ago. "You said this would keep her safe. She wanted her daughter back." I watched Mark read it on his phone while we were watching TV. He stood up without a word and walked out onto the porch. Stayed there for 30 minutes, pacing. Diane cried that night in their bedroom. I heard her through the wall. It was working, and I wasn't done. I mailed a copy of Rachel's missing persons report to our house, no return address. A week later, I slipped a USB drive into Mark's briefcase with a scanned copy of the police file Douglas had filed the night Rachel vanished. I labeled the folder, "You never buried the truth." He didn't go to work for 2 days. He barely spoke. He started checking the locks on the doors 3-4 times a night. Once, I caught him staring out the living room window at 3 a.m., just standing there in the dark like he was waiting for something, or someone. Diane wasn't faring any better. I walked into the kitchen one morning and found her sitting on the floor, sobbing, clutching an old baby shoe I didn't even know she'd kept. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me, but I recognized her. Finally, she wasn't my mother. She was the reason mine never came home. They were unraveling, thread by thread, but I wasn't doing it for satisfaction. I wasn't doing it to scare them. I was doing it for Rachel, for the years she lost, for the voice they silenced, and because they thought they got away with it. Until now, they had lived 24 years pretending they were saviors. Now, they would remember they were thieves, and this? This was just the beginning. There's a difference between revenge and justice, but sometimes they look the same. Douglas told me she used to love the mountains. Rachel, my mother. When she was younger, he said, she'd drive out to Gold Bar just to sit by the Skykomish River and read for hours. She called it her escape hatch. It's also where she vanished. Douglas remembered the area from when they were kids. He used to ride dirt bikes through the hills with their cousins. There were old logging trails back then, mostly forgotten now, overgrown and silent. He took me out there one foggy morning. We parked off a gravel road and hiked into the brush for over an hour. My shoes were soaked. My legs ached. But then Douglas stopped. "There," he said, pointing. At first, I saw nothing, just moss and pine needles and the usual decay of the forest floor. But then I noticed the mound. Subtle. Unnatural. Like the land had been disturbed and tried to cover itself back up. I snapped a photo. The next day, an anonymous tip was sent to the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. Coordinates. A photo. A note, "Check under the hill. She's been waiting long enough." They showed up with cadaver dogs and shovels. We watched the news from Douglas's place in silence, holding our breath. By the second day, it hit the headlines: "Skeletal remains found in Gold Bar, tied to 2001 missing persons case." By day 5, it was official. DNA confirmed what we already knew. Rachel Merrick had been found, buried in a shallow grave at the edge of a logging road, wrapped in a weathered blue tarp. The autopsy report wasn't public yet, but a detective told Douglas privately, her skull had been fractured. Likely blunt force trauma. They reopened the investigation. The press swarmed. News vans lined up on our quiet Redmond Street. My phone buzzed non-stop. Calls from reporters, old friends, even a few people I hadn't spoken to in years who suddenly wanted to talk. And Mark? He ran. The day after the body was identified, he packed a bag and left. Diane claimed not to know where he went. I think she was lying, but her silence was different now. It wasn't defensive. It was broken. I sat across from her in the kitchen that evening, the same place this had all started, and laid the newspaper between us. Her hands shook as she looked down at Rachel's photo. I didn't hit her, she whispered. But I didn't stop him either. I said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. The world knew now. The lie they built their life on had been dug up and laid bare for everyone to see, but even as they started to fall, I knew it wasn't over, because one question still haunted me. If Mark was willing to bury a woman to keep me, where did he go when it all came crashing down? For a while, I let myself believe it was over. The world finally knew what Diane and Mark had done. Rachel Merrick was no longer just a name buried in a missing persons report. She was real again. A mother. A sister. A woman who tried to protect her daughter and died for it. The investigation was ongoing. Diane was being questioned. I was listed as a key witness. And Mark was gone, vanished. They issued a warrant for him, but there were no leads. No credit card use. No phone signals. No sightings. The man had disappeared like smoke, so I tried to move on. I stayed with Douglas for a while. I got a new therapist. I started writing again. And every so often, I'd stand by the window at night and look at the trees, half expecting to see Mark standing there, but he never came. Until he did. It started with a package, no return address. No postmark. Just my name scrawled across the front in block letters. Inside was a single photograph. It was taken from across a street. A long lens shot. Blurry, but unmistakable. Mark, standing in front of a boarded-up motel somewhere hot and dry, red dust, cracked concrete, a cactus in the background. Not Washington. Not anywhere near here. He was thinner. Older. But his eyes. His eyes were still sharp. Still calculating. On the back of the photo, in the same thick handwriting, were 6 chilling words. You still have one more secret. My blood ran cold. What secret? I showed Douglas immediately. He stared at the photo, his jaw tight. He's watching you. But why now? I asked. Why send this? He didn't answer. And neither did I. Because deep down, we both knew Mark wasn't done. A week passed, then I noticed something else. In a photo on my phone from a coffee shop 2 towns over, I was taking a selfie with a friend. In the window behind us, barely visible, was a man sitting at a table near the door. Sunglasses. Hood. Head turned slightly away, but the posture. The build, it was him. He was following me, and then I remembered something Diane said, back when she was falling apart in the kitchen. I didn't stop him. Not just from hurting Rachel. She meant something else. She meant something ongoing. What if there was more? What if Rachel hadn't been the only one? What if I wasn't the only child? I sat on my bed, staring at the photo of Mark, and felt it settle in my bones. He was hunting me not to silence me, but because I hadn't discovered everything yet, and that last secret, it was something he was still willing to kill for.